Hey guys, welcome back to AlgoYogi. We are doing array and hashing series, and our next problem in the list is two-sum. Two-sum is the first problem of LeetCode. It's like the oldest problem that has always been there, and it's very frequently asked. So it has like 65,000 likes. So you can just imagine like how crazy this problem is. So I'm assuming you might be just getting started with LeetCode now. So let's start our journey. I'll change the view to sum. So given an array of integer nums, given an integer called target. So we are given an array of integer nums, and then we are also given an integer called target. Return indices of two numbers such that they add up to target. You may assume that each input would be exactly one solution, like so there will be only those two numbers which will add up to the target, and you may not use same element twice. That also makes sense. Okay, so now we have understood the problem. We are given nums and target. We need to find two numbers in nums that add up to the target, and these numbers are going to answer will be unique, and you have to add two different numbers. You can't add just same number. Okay, so what is our brute force solution for this? What is our brute force solution? So for brute force, not force, what we can do is, how about I just iterate, I just used two for loops, nested for loops, and for each number I start with I plus 1 index for the next for loop, and check if I can find another number and add those two to basically check if they are equal to target. So simply what I can do is I can have a for loop. So for a in nums, or maybe it would be better if we use the index. For I in range length of nums, right? And for j in range, you can start with I plus 1 this time, because you don't want to get the same number, and you have already covered till I. You're checking for each number, and you just want to start with basically the other numbers. So you don't have to like restart again, because you have already checked those numbers, right? So length nums, and if these two numbers, so nums at I plus nums at j, and I hope you can see the code, nums at j, they're equals to target, then you return I and j. If you can't find the numbers, then you don't have to worry about it, because they've already said there will be an answer. It's guaranteed the answer will be present. So this is the brute force solution. You can go ahead and implement it. We can go ahead and implement this, and then we'll come back to a better approach, more optimized approach. So for I in range length nums, for j in range, you can start with I plus 1 and go up to the length of nums again. And if nums at I plus nums at j is equals to target, then we can simply return I and j. These are the indexes that we can return, and this will actually always give us an answer. But for just making our function like, okay, so here is our solution. Now we're gonna run it on test cases. This is brute force, of course, and its time complexity is big of n square because of this two nested loop. Now see, like you can see already the time complexity is like a little bad, right? And once we submit a more optimized version, which will be when we introduce a little bit of space, and then bring our time complexity from big of n squared to big of n. All right, so let's move on to the more optimized version. All right, so that brute force solution was big of n squared time complexity. So if we introduce a little bit of little bit of space, then we can bring down the time complexity. So big of n. Okay, so let's do that. So I know for sure that this target right here, this will be sum of two numbers, right? So this will be sum of, from my nums, if I just like do this, it's not wrong to say that this is going to be sum of nums I and nums j, right? So let's say if I am looking for nums j, so I can write this as nums j is equals to target minus nums I. Okay, isn't this what I am looking for? Isn't this what I'm looking for? So what I can do is so that I can track what are the numbers that I've already seen, so that if I'm standing on the current number, and so that I can know that if target minus current number already exists somewhere in my map, then that means that that number and my current number combined together makes target. So it's just all about tracking the index of that previous number and then getting that number, that index, and then returning it with the current number, because they both sum up to target. So here what I can do is I can create a map. I'll create a map nums, you can call it, or num map is better term. Nums map, initially it's going to be empty, then I will start my for loop. So for, you can say num and I, and I think that's how you write it, or I and nums. And if you are enumerating, we will test it. Enumerate. What are you enumerating? Nums. Okay, this is the code that I'm writing. So you can say it's pseudocode. Okay, so what I can do right now, so what I'll check that number, the second number that I'm trying to find. So if target minus this current num in target minus this current num, which is nums j, in my nums map. So what I'm checking right now is that the current number that I'm seeing right now here, this number, if this plus target minus num will give me another number, if that number already exists in map, which would definitely mean that that number plus num is equals to target, and you can simply just, if you can convert this as like num equals to that number, let's call it b, then target is equals to num plus b. You can see it. Okay, so just to prove what I'm saying is makes sense, Okay, let's go back. So if that number is already in my map, so what I'll do is I found my answer and I can return. What are you returning? You are returning from my nums, my nums map, for this num, target minus num, target minus num, this number's index, it will give me index, and then the current index. This is what I can return now. Otherwise for this current num, I will store at least, so that I will store that number and its index into my else to my nums map. The reason I'm storing it, so maybe next time if I come across something else that would basically sum with this to give me the target. So I will just store this num and its index into my nums map. And then finally return -1 in case you don't find your answer. So this is my optimized version. Here the time complexity is big of n. That's way better in terms of, if you compare it with the brute force approach. And space complexity here is also big of n. So I think in time complexity is like really good solution, but in space complexity you have, the last solution was brute force was better in the space complexity. So you don't know, but it's better you discuss both the solution with your interviewer and tell them that you are the king of LeetCode and you know what you're doing. So let's write down this solution as well. I'm gonna comment out the brute force. So I'm even gonna say that this was brute force. So brute force. Okay, so optimized version, we're gonna have something called nums map, initially empty, and for I in range length nums, my current number is current num, or you can just say num is, or you can just do enumerate also. Okay, nums I is what I have. So if target minus nums num in my nums map, that means I found my answer. So I can just return nums map, or maybe it's you're gonna return it as a list. So nums map, and provided this guy, because you've just seen it in your nums map, and if you return this, that means this will combine with your num plus this number makes together target, and then you just simply give I. So that is your answer. Otherwise you have to store in your nums map, just store the in your nums map, store for this particular num, store the index, so that next time you can return, you can find out actually if you have seen that number before, and that could combine with your current number to give you a target. So this is it. Let's try it out. I'm gonna zoom out, and hopefully this is good. Awesome. Let's submit. You know what happens a lot of times, a lot of people know how to solve it, but they just get so confused. Like sometimes they just get confused here. Like, what am I checking? What am I storing? Like, target minus num or num, checking nums. There are two ways of doing it. Rather than just checking this, you could have stored this thing right here in here. You could have stored this right here, and then you could have stored the difference, and next time you could have just checked the num if that num exists, but this is better. All right, so let's go back to AlgoYogi, mark it, solve, and see you guys later in the next problem.